bound for Warsaw. In the cockpit of the wide-body Boeing 767, Captain Tad Vrona was focused on the safety of the transatlantic flight. The ground maintenance crew told him the aircraft was good to go.
It looks good, so we are ready to taxi and to take off.
Flight 16 took off from Newark Airport just after 10 p.m. Soon after, there was an indication of a malfunction with one of the hydraulic systems. But with two backups, there was no cause for concern. The flight over the ocean was smooth as silk, turbulence-free.
That night, it was unusually smooth.
But just minutes before the scheduled landing, all of that would change. It was then that business class passenger Greg Cohen noticed flight attendants racing in and out of the cockpit.
The head flight attendant, you could just see, all the color out of his face. He was pale, white as a ghost. You could cut the tension with a knife.
Then the word came over the PA. This is actual video taken by a passenger on the flight.
Emergency in Warsaw.
The plane would be making an emergency landing.
Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to remind you that you have to have a seatbelt fastened.
I actually called over the flight attendant and I asked, I said, what does this mean? The only thing that they said to me was, we think we're going to make it to our destination.
We think we're going to make it to our destination?
Yes.
Crew members were purposely giving no details. Despite their professional demeanor, they were frightened themselves. Flight attendant Magda Gortat had 17 years experience.
I couldn't breathe, actually. Nobody had to tell me that we have a really serious problem. I knew it.
Even more serious than she knew. This is a twin of the 767 in jeopardy as seen on the ground. You can see the landing gear, the wheels which support all the weight of the 280,000-pound giant. But on Flight 16, the emergency was that all three landing gear, the wheels for the Boeing 767, would not go down. Captain Vrona realized he had only about an hour and 20 minutes worth of fuel to figure out what to do. The wide-body jet might have to crash land on its belly. And without gear, there are no brakes.
It's a very dangerous situation. We probably have a serious problem.
As the plane circled Warsaw, residents took pictures from the ground. In these photos, you can plainly see the gear were not lowered. Landing a plane without its wheels, an airliner belly flop, would be a life-or-death proposition. No 767 had ever done this before. When it attempted to land at the Warsaw airport, the airliner could bounce and break up, or cartwheel and turn into a fireball, or it might not stop. As the cockpit crew tried to troubleshoot the problem with about 50 minutes worth of fuel remaining, in the cabin there was a growing realization something had gone seriously wrong. Passenger Andres Pino.
I saw one of the stewards rip down the curtains which separate different compartments. And I said, well, that's serious then, that's not a game.
Then, with about 40 minutes to go,
I looked out the window and I saw F-16s, like around our plane.
Polish Air Force F-16s were scrambled to take a look at the plane's underbelly up close to see if they could determine the problem.
I'm not a very nervous kind of person, but as things started to unfold, even I started to get a little nervous.
And you decided to text your wife?
Yes.
With about 20 minutes to go, Greg Cohen got a cell phone signal as they circled Warsaw.
What was your thought process when you picked up the phone?
God forbid if the wrong thing happens here, and I didn't reach out to my wife and family and tell them how much I love them and how much I care about them. It just would be terrible.
He texted what he feared might be his last message.
We are making an emergency landing. I think we will be okay. I love you and thank God for you and our children. I'm sorry to text you this, but I love you so much.
And back in New Jersey, his wife Michelle couldn't believe what she was seeing on her phone.
I broke down when I read it, and I immediately started crying, and I got a little sick.
He's sending a message that someone sends who doesn't think they're going to make it.
Yeah.
So this was, just stunning to receive this.
Stunning.
she texted her husband back.
You know, I told him, just in case, you know, what I wanted to tell him.
What was that?
That he's given me the best life and the best children, and I love him.
And amazingly, Greg got that reassuring message as he tried to reassure those around him.
The woman next to me didn't speak English. She was Polish, you know, and I went to hold her hand and try to comfort her. There were a lot of people who were just very quiet and praying. You know, there were people who were crying.
By about 10 minutes before landing, fire trucks moved into place, and ambulances arrived at the airport from the center of Warsaw. And while the plane was still in flight, live TV coverage across Poland showed the path of the holding pattern while the crew tried to fix the problem. In the cockpit, the minutes flew by, but they seemed like an eternity to the passengers. It was especially tense because just 18 months earlier, Poland's president and 95 other prominent citizens had died in the crash of the president's plane on a trip to Russia. Passenger Andres Pino couldn't get the images of the gruesome TV coverage out of his mind.
You were thinking about that tragedy even as you're preparing for this emergency.
Oh, yes. That had a big influence on my imagination. I did put my passport behind my shirt on my chest.
To identify your body.
Yeah.
If this ended badly.
Yeah. I was ready for the worst, hoping for the best.
And the flight attendants knew that the fuel and time were running out.
We do it or not. We have to do it. It was the longer 5 minutes in my life, actually.
During those last 5 minutes, Captain Vrona gave up hope of somehow lowering the gear. He made a final calculation. They would have just one chance to touch the runway. Captain Vrona would have to somehow land the plane with the engines acting like the runners of a sled on a foam-down runway. If something went wrong, he couldn't attempt to go around again. The engines would be too damaged. And he knew all too well of another danger. There was a highway just at the end of the runway.
It was a very dangerous moment for us to stop the plane, not to lose the runway, and to allow the plane to slide outside the airfield.
The last thing I remember is just, you know, for us to brace for landing and brace for impact.
That was head down.
Your head between your legs.
What happened next was captured by multiple cameras both inside and outside. Images that will go down in aviation history.